Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be with all of you as we begin Gay Pride Month. Today in San Francisco, we had wear orange because of our concern about gun violence, and wearing orange is the color at which we acknowledge the danger of it all. Tonight's Taking Pride and Disarming Hate is our theme tonight for our volunteer update. We have a very special guest, Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. I'm going to talk about him some more, but first I want to tell him about you. Congressman Cicilline will be talking with this evening with our VIPs, our volunteers in politics. They are very special people, are very important people, because as you know, no matter how hard we work in Congress with our internal maneuvering, without the outside mobilization to advance our causes, elect our candidates and the rest, we can only have so much success. We're very honored that you're with us this evening. You're at the center of so much activity in Congress right now that is so important. It being Gay Pride Month, I take great pride in the district that I represent. We say here, people say to me, oh, it's easy for you because people in San Francisco are so tolerant. I said, no, tolerant to us is a condescending word. This isn't about tolerance. It's about respect. It's about taking pride. And that's exactly what we want to do tonight. My friends, Congressman Cicilline has been our champion in the Congress, the author of the Equality Act. This is no small feat. This was a very hard piece of legislation to pass, and he succeeded in the House. We're hoping in the Senate. He'll talk more about it, and what he doesn't say, I'll brag about him further on that. And then again, we're saying taking pride and disarming hate. Mr. Cicilline has been a champion on the Judiciary Committee and gun violence prevention. He will talk about several pieces of legislation that will be marked up in the next week or 10 days in the Congress that he has authored, and other legislation that he has been part of advancing in the Congress. We could not be better served than to have him here. Here is a person who, when he introduced the Equality Act, had John Lewis standing with him and saying, let us open up the Civil Rights Act and include LGBTQ people in the bill. This is the same person, David Cicilline, who was with John Lewis by his side when John Lewis, David Cicilline, and Catherine Clark and John Larson had a sit-in on the floor of the Congress of the United States that lasted over 24 hours. So he has worked with John Lewis in ending discrimination and saving the lives of our children, and in so many, many other ways. With that, I'm pleased to yield to him so that we can have a further discussion with great appreciation and great pride. Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to be on this call, and I know this is a very revered group because you always speak about the importance of outside mobilization and how critical it is to the progress we make on any issue. So I feel very honored to be asked to join this distinguished group of advocates and volunteers and individuals and organizations that are fighting for equality and justice and to reduce gun violence in our country. So thank you so much. I want to begin by wishing everyone happy Pride. And although Pride Month is always a time where we celebrate the LGBTQ plus community and acknowledge our progress, this year in particular, it's a time to really recognize the urgency of action. And we are very fortunate to have a Speaker of the House who deep in her bones understands the importance of equality for our community. It never required us to convince her in any way. She's been the most powerful champion in the history of the Congress for the LGBTQ plus community. And under her leadership, we passed the Equality Act twice, which really is the only way we can ensure that LGBTQ plus people can live in America free from discrimination, because it takes the existing civil rights architecture and adds sexual orientation and gender identity to all the other protected classes. So discrimination would be prohibited as a matter of federal law in housing, employment, public accommodations, jury service, federal funding and education and credit. So a fully inclusive civil rights bill, and we're working hard to get it through the Senate now. It's more important than ever that happening, because as you all know, there have been a record number of anti-LGBTQ laws introduced in state legislatures, some already passed, with a real focus on the trans and non-binary community, particularly our young people. And so it's really important that we get this across the finish line. We have a president who ran on a commitment to the Equality Act, who's eager to sign it. We just need to get it to his desk. So our work isn't done, but we should take stock in how much progress we've made in getting that bill to the Senate. And now we need to get it through the Senate and to President Biden's desk once and for all. And as I tell everyone, I have no doubt the Equality Act will become the law of the land. The only question is how quickly that can happen. And I just want to say thank you to the Speaker and so many of you who have been in this fight with us for a very long time. I also want to just mention, of course, what is on everyone's mind right now, even as we begin Pride Month, and that is the epidemic of gun violence in this country. And, it is hard to believe that guns are now the leading cause of death of American kids. I mean, let that sink in. It's the leading cause of death. We've had over 200 mass shootings this year alone, 27 school shootings. And each year, almost 40,000 people die in this country at the hands of a gun. This doesn't happen in any other country in the world. This is a peculiarly American problem. And we're not powerless to do, about this. There are things we can do. And we've already passed in the House two really important bills. One, to strengthen criminal background checks, and the second, to close the Charleston loophole. We know background checks work because from the time they were first enacted under the Brady law, 3.5 million gun sales were denied, which means 3.5 million people went to buy a gun who were legally prohibited from buying it, and they were denied that right. And that means they work. The problem is thousands and thousands of guns are sold in this country without a background check because they are bought at gun shows or online. So this bill will just make sure all gun sales are subjected to criminal background checks. It's common sense. 90% of the American people support it. It shouldn't be controversial, including most gun owners, but yet the Senate Republicans in particular, have blocked consideration of that. Similarly, we passed another bill which will close a really serious loophole. If your background check, your criminal background check doesn't come back within 3 days, you are allowed to buy the gun regardless of what your criminal background is. That's crazy. And it means people who are not permitted to buy a gun are allowed to buy a gun. That's a real problem. That's what happened in the AME Church in South Carolina. And so this closes that loophole. Now, everyone should agree with both of those bills. These are very common sense, and yet Republicans in the Senate are blocking their consideration. But because of the Speaker's leadership and because of the real commitment of House Democrats, we are coming together tomorrow in an emergency hearing of the House Judiciary Committee to mark up a really important piece of legislation. It's really a combination of about 5 or 6 really good gun violence prevention bills. And it will raise the age to 21 for people who will be legally allowed to purchase a firearm. It will provide provisions to prevent gun trafficking and straw purchases. It will prohibit the use of ghost guns. It will require safe storage of firearms. It will close the bump stock loophole, and it will keep Americans safe by addressing a large capacity magazines. So there's a lot of really good provision. This is probably the most comprehensive gun safety bill ever put before Congress. We're going to pass it out of the Judiciary Committee after, I'm sure, what will be a long markup tomorrow, and then bring it to the House floor as soon as possible. We are also going to consider the red flag legislation by Congresswoman McBath that will make certain that people who are dangerous to themselves or others will be prevented from buying firearms. This is, again, very common sense. If someone is dangerous, they've exhibited dangerousness either to themselves or others, they ought not be able to go into a gun store and buy a gun. And that legislation will come to the House floor quickly as well. And we have more. There are dozens of really good bills that will help reduce gun violence in this country. But we no longer, we have got to convince our Republican colleagues to work with us to get these bills to the president's desk. What is happening in this country should be intolerable to everyone. When children can't go to school and feel safe, when people can't go to a movie theater or a synagogue or church and pray without fear of gun violence, something is is seriously wrong. And we have lots of things we can be doing to reduce gun violence. And tomorrow will be yet another package of bills that we'll send to the House floor and ultimately to the Senate. And really need your help in convincing our Senate Republican colleagues to do what's right to protect the lives of their constituents, to pass common sense proposals that will make a real difference in our effort to reduce gun violence in this country, and to show the American people that while we're doing a lot of other things to address inflation and create good paying jobs and rebuild the infrastructure for America, that we also are taking on this really important issue that matters in the lives of so many people in our country. And happy to engage in the conversation and thank the speaker again for her leadership.
Thank you very much, Congressman Cicilline, for your leadership. These bills are very important. You have a couple of others. I know you have been our champion in terms of the assault weapon legislation that may be close down the road for us here. And then your alert, Amber Alert, but you have a different name for the legislation you may want to mention.
Absolutely. So the assault weapons ban, we're at, I think, 205 or 206 co-sponsors, the most we've ever had, and continuing to work to be sure that we can continue to grow support for that bill. These are weapons of war. As you know, Madam Speaker, you've been a strong proponent of the assault weapons ban. They were designed to kill as many people as quickly as possible. When we had an assault weapons ban in effect, mass shootings significantly declined. As the president mentioned the other day in his remarks, when it was allowed to expire, mass shootings tripled. And assault weapons are the weapon of choice of these killers because they kill people quickly. The damage they do is unspeakable to the human body. They have no business in the neighborhoods or communities in which we live. And we're going to work hard to get that bill to the floor and over to the Senate as well. And sadly, because active shooters have become such a common event in America, we've introduced a bill, a bipartisan bill, to create an active shooter alert so that people don't have to rely on Twitter or, online notices, but an Amber Alert system that will notify both law enforcement and concerned citizens so they don't go into an active shooting incident unknowingly. It's a terrific bill. It's really a gun safety bill. It's a number one priority for law enforcement, endorsed by the FOP and a number of law enforcement agencies, because it will help reduce, the number of killings that occur when these active shooting incidents happen. And, that hopefully will come up soon as well. So I think we're trying to respond to this urgent crisis in our country of gun violence. And look, some people have argued, you can't do any of this stuff because of the Second Amendment. That's not true. There's no constitutional provision that is absolute. Even the First Amendment, we've all heard the phrase, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There are limitations on what kind of guns you can have, where you can have them, et cetera. That's been recognized by the Supreme Court. So it's really time for our Republican colleagues to join us in this effort and to make sure these bills get to the president's desk.
Well, Congressman Cicilline, as you go through all of that, we salute you. We take pride in our Californians. Mike Thompson, who's the chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, has brought people together, striving to do so in a bipartisan way. And we're very proud of Senator Dianne Feinstein, who, going way back, was the leader in terms of the assault weapon ban way back when in the 1990s, a long time ago, but we're proud of her leadership on this as well. As we discuss this, we're coming on to the anniversary of Pulse, which broke our hearts. So many lives lost. I'll never forget you organizing us on the steps of the Capitol with the photographs of each of the 49 people who were killed, young, vibrant young people killed that night. I often be praying for the survivors of these young people who, when I visited them in Florida or when they visited us in DC, said the best thing you can do for us is to make sure that you stop this gun violence in our country. I'd love to yield to you to talk about Pulse. This is where pride and gun violence prevention come together.
Yeah, no question about it, Madam Speaker. And, that's one of the memories that really sticks with me is the young people that have been victims of gun violence, particularly young people from the LGBTQ plus community. And I think sometimes we forget that every time there's a shooting of any kind, and sometimes it's a mass shooting, sometimes it's a shooting that Robin Kelly, our colleague from Illinois, speaks about it's a daily occurrence in the city of Chicago. But very often when these mass shootings happen, it causes families who have lost a loved one in a prior incident to sort of be sort of re-traumatized. They think again about the night they got that phone call or the moment they had to go identify the body of a child or a loved one. And it's just really unspeakable pain. And I remember with the Pulse shooting, when I went to visit the site there and saw all the beautiful notes and all the heartbreaking stories that were being told about these young people. And, even the shootings that, in Uvalde and Buffalo, these are young people who've been robbed of an opportunity to live a life and to do the great things that they were expected to do. And their families will never recover from that pain. And so I think when you have incidents like that, you develop a real sense of urgency that we've got to do something to honor those we have lost to gun violence. The best thing we can do is pass laws to reduce the likelihood it can ever happen again. And that's what I'm proud of, what we're going to do tomorrow. We owe it to all the victims of gun violence to do everything we can to make sure no family in America ever has to experience that pain again.
Well, thank you for your leadership in both areas in terms of ending gun violence and, again, ending discrimination. I know that you are the head of the Equality Caucus in the Congress. You have led efforts to protect trans kids, which is just becoming a heartbreaking issue for many of us to see what the governor of Texas and others have been doing. We have to protect the trans kids, including having Title IX, which is about to have its 50th anniversary in June, to apply to LGBTQ students. Would you like to address that issue?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. I mean, look, the trans community, our whole community has been under attack for a number of years now, led by, sadly, some of our colleagues in Congress, which I never thought I'd see. But particularly the trans community has been particularly under attack. And, I think if there's a community that needs the protections of the Equality more than ever, it's the trans community, the non-binary community. And so, unfortunately, our opponents, the opponents of full equality for our community, the opponents of the trans community have latched on to a number of issues in a way to try to vilify particularly trans athletes, trans kids. It's really horrific. We've got a number of pieces of legislation specifically to protect the trans community, particularly young people. But I think it's also very important for everyone just to speak out and strongly condemn the kind of discrimination and legislation and treatment of trans people, particularly trans kids. It was, I think, really remarkable when the President of the United States in the State of the Union said, to trans kids, I've got your back. And when the Equality Caucus met with President Biden, and it was the first time in the history of America that the LGBTQ plus Equality Caucus met with a sitting president. We met with President Biden. And I told him in that meeting how much that meant to the trans community and how, by uttering those words that night, he saved lives because trans kids knew that someone saw them and was protecting them. And it was none other than the President of the United States. But this is a really serious issue and a community that really deserves and needs everyone's support and protection. And we have legislation to do what we need to do in our daily lives and speak out whenever we see people engaging in conduct which disrespects or doesn't recognize the full dignity of trans people in every way.
When we talk about the outside mobilization of the LGBTQ community has been indispensable to our efforts to protect people and their families. So many of the trans families have been so beautiful in their advocacy and the pride they take in their children. My nephew's child is trans, and she is happy, doing so well in school, and just we're so very, very proud of her. But not all kids have that reception in their families. Here in San Francisco, some of the trans kids that are homeless on the street are there because their families have not received them so well. We would like to give them a better comfort level. But what I hear from my own family is, that and from my grandniece is, every time we talk about this, and as you say, show them that we see them, we hear them, we care about them, we want to help them, it sends a very positive message to them. We have to do more than words, but we want to be sure that they know the priority they are to us. And that's why your work in the Congress has been so important on this. Just to remind, years ago when we did the hate crimes legislation, we were having a hard time getting it done because outside businesses were interfering and saying that we shouldn't be doing it. We could do hate crimes. They said to me as speaker at the time, now this is a number of years ago, if you take out trans, you can pass this bill in 1 minute. I said, if we take out trans, we're not passing this bill in 100 years because we're not taking out trans. It is the most important part of the bill where some of the most vulnerability is. And so we kept it in, we passed it. Matthew Shepard's mother came and helped us pass the bill, working with Barney Frank at the time. It was a struggle, but then it became the most normal thing for everybody accepted it once we went down that path. And President Obama was so great in terms of trans people in the military, as you recall. But again, we have to do more, and we think that with Title IX, that is one opportunity we have for the trans community. One point I want to bring up is the assault on privacy by the Supreme Court. We know that Roe v. Wade is at risk in the court, and part of the draft, whether it's a decision, whatever it is, the draft paper that was out there really undermined the right of privacy in the Constitution of the United States and the precedent that was established with Roe v. Wade and marriage equality in the court. By undermining precedent and undermining privacy, all of this is at risk. And I'm very concerned that the marriage equality might be. How do you see that?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Madam Speaker. I think one of the things that is really alarming about that draft opinion is it's really, we have a long history in this country of the Supreme Court expanding rights and recognizing greater personal liberty and personal freedom and personal autonomy, and recognizing that precedents in these issues really matter. And their willingness to reverse 50 years of jurisprudence with respect to a woman's right to make decisions affecting her own body and her own health care is shocking. And what's really alarming, as you point out, is that rationale could easily be applied to reversing decisions that protect contraception, that protect marriage equality, and protect a number of other freedoms. And I think there are a lot of us who look at that Supreme Court decision and look at the 30-year campaign of the Republicans to pack the court and recognize that what the Republicans are trying to do through the Supreme Court now is a number of things that they know they can't achieve politically. Politically, they can't reverse Roe versus Wade. It's accepted as the law of the land by a vast majority of the American people. Marriage equality, also deeply popular with the American people. Contraceptive. So what they're trying to do is, because they've stacked the court, they're trying to use the court to accomplish a set of objectives that they couldn't accomplish in the political process. That's alarming. And I think it's, elections matter, and we have to be sure that we win the House, we win the Senate, so that we can, ensure that the Supreme Court is not permitted to roll back all of these rights that we have in this country as citizens of America that they seem intent on rolling back. And so I think there's a lot of reason in the LGBTQ plus community that we're very concerned about the reasoning of the court and how it might be extended in future decisions.
And how this affects people in their everyday lives. We have to help victims of gun violence, victims of discrimination in terms of the LGBTQ community. And one place we do that is in the appropriations bill, where we grant or withhold approaches that are in keeping with our values. And so I'm very proud of Rosa DeLauro, our chair of that committee, and the work.
And as a former appropriator.
Yes, I always bring up appropriations committee because that's where I'm from. But I also want to talk about Mark Takano, who is the chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and he has been such a champion also in how we treat our LGBTQ community in the military and when they come home.
Yes, Chairman Takano is the only LGBTQ member of a full committee in the Congress of the United States, and has been an extraordinary leader on Veterans Affairs, and particularly also paying careful attention to LGBTQ plus veterans, and to be sure that they are treated fairly and with dignity, and has been heroic, just had a huge success with the burn pit legislation that he's worked on for a number of years.
Right.
But he's a personal hero of mine and a great hero to our community, and is accomplishing great things for veterans.
And in the full LGBTQ approach that we take to all of this. Well, it's been a real honor to have you with us, Congressman Cicilline. I was honored to be with you at Brown University this weekend, so I could boast of your work as a champion of
And
gun
we
violence
should be calling
protection.
you Dr. Pelosi with your honorary degree.
Very honored by that. And I was honored how, when I talked about LGBTQ, that got a good response from the students there. But in any case, thank you so much. Tomorrow's a big day for you. Their chairman of the committee, Mr. Nadler, told me that the markup might go until 11:59 tomorrow night, from 10 o'clock in the morning to 11:59. That's when it'll have to be gavelled down, because we don't want it to go into another day, which pushes it further down the road. So we hope to have great progress in terms of protecting our children from gun violence. This figures you used earlier about the leading cause of death of our children in our country is gun violence. Thank you for championing our children in so many respects, including protecting them from gun violence. And thank you for your extraordinary leadership. I just can't, it could be impossible to exaggerate how hard it was to get the opening up of the Civil Rights Bill to include LGBTQ, because we're in dangerous territory with some folks in Capitol Hill, and it took a great deal of leadership on your part to get the Congressional Black Caucus and our tri-caucuses to agree to that, and to have John Lewis stand by your side as you introduced together the Equality Act. But that, I want to again thank our VIPs. I want to thank our interpreters here today, Catherine and Amanda, for making our views known to our volunteers in politics. And thank all of our volunteers in politics for joining us, more importantly, for their mobilization to make good things happen. And with that, you honored us with your presence. You informed us with your wisdom. I want to give you the last word, Congressman Cicilline. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say thank you for, again, acknowledging John Lewis. He was definitely our secret weapon in our fight for equality, and the LGBTQ plus community will be forever in his debt for that. But thank you, Madam Speaker. On all these issues, you have been our greatest champion, and we feel very lucky to have you leading us both in the gun violence prevention work and in full equality for our community. So happy Pride. I hope everyone has a safe month. And I'm going to get to bed now so we can get up early and get our work done tomorrow in committee. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Happy Pride. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you all.